Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our 7th annual Raise Your Hands Against Racism signature event. Raise Your Hands Against Racism began in the year 2015. Our first event was held at 7 different locations across the Lower Mainland, 5 in Vancouver, 1 in White Rock, and 1 in Burnaby. And over these past few years, we've had the support of the City of Surrey, Delta, and U.S. Minister in joining our campaign and declaring a Raise Your Hands Against Racism Day in correlation with the Festival of Holi. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we are not able to hold this event with all of you, but we still have a dynamic program lined up for you to enjoy virtually as we recognize our past award winners, our winners for this year, and of course, lots of entertainment. And now with a few words, here is our company CEO, Ms. Shushma Dutt.
Thank you, Safia. For our event today, we are very pleased to have the Prime Minister address us. I remember in 2015 when we started this event, Justin Trudeau raised his hand against racism for us. He wasn't the Prime Minister then. And today, as the Prime Minister of our country, he is sending a message about race through this program. The Prime Minister of Canada, Honorable Justin Trudeau.
Hello, Spice Radio. Bonjour à tous. I wanted to say congratulations on the 7th year of your Hands Against Racism initiative. And thank you for all of the work your team is doing to shine light on discrimination and racism in our society. This is a difficult time for all Canadians. But for marginalized communities and Indigenous and racialized people, the impacts of the pandemic have been far greater. This crisis has revealed some of the gaps that still exist in Canada. It has highlighted the unfortunate truth that systemic racism is still a lived reality for too many. And it has resulted in the rise of anti-Asian discrimination and hate, both here at home and around the world. None of this is acceptable. That's why our government is committed to addressing these issues in a way that is informed by the lived experiences of racialized communities and Indigenous peoples. And as we build back better for everyone, we will continue to fight racism, discrimination and hatred in all its forms. Mais pour régler ces enjeux, on doit travailler ensemble. We have to all play a role in creating the change that we need, and that's why initiatives like this one are so important. So thank you for the work that you're doing. Encore une fois, merci.
It gives me a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Suresh Kurl today in our program. When we started this event 7 years ago, I talked to Dr. Kurl and I asked him to explain the importance of Holi because our event is inspired by the event of Holi. So Dr. Kurl talked about it and I've asked him to be in the program today and talk about that as well. Suresh, you're most welcome in our program. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
So let's talk about Holi. Do you think Holi is indicative of the fact that all humans are equal?
I believe so, very strongly believe so. I remember when I was a child growing up there, and in the morning, the next day of the fire ceremony, we used to go on the streets and all the shops will be open actually. And people will come to those shops and rub gulal on each other, not water, but gulal on each other. And that was the time I saw people hugging each other. That was the day when man could hug man without any stigma, without any problem, no caste problem, a Brahmin, even the person who used to broom the street had the courage to bring a fistful of gulal with open arms. How can you say no? It is. Now, women used to do their own stuff, men did it on the streets. And that was not enough. In the evening, when the color was over, they will change into new clothes and they hug again each other. So that was the moment you could, I think about that any animosity, any grudge was washed away, colored with gulals.
At least one day of the year.
One day of the year, at least one day of the year. They had reserved that day to forgive all animosities,
Towards each other.
any feelings, harsh feelings you had. That was the day you close them, you end them.
In our lifetime, are we ever going to be able to eradicate racism?
It is a very tough question, and allow me to tell you why I don't think it is going to be over. Racism started in India when the Aryans came to India 2,000 years ago. In Rigveda, you will find references to two colors, Aryavarna and Dasyavarna. Aryavarna is white, Dasyavarna is black, Dravidian. They did not like them. They used them as dasas, as servants, so they allocated a color to them, Dasyavarna. 2,000 years ago. Have we eliminated it in 2,000 years? Don't we have racism in India? We may not have racism, but we have colorism.
For sure.
We have the goddess Parvati. One of her name is Gora, white. And we don't like black people. And we have saying, children, I've heard her children saying, Kali ka luti, Bengan luti, Budh ke bazaar mein dham dham kuti. These things stay here
Right.
because there's something wrong with them. My
Yeah.
mother, if she ever heard me singing this one, I'll get a slap. Who are you talking about? Your auntie? Me?
Sureshji, Hands Against Racism, we do this every year. Is there any importance of this in today's time?
Sushma Di, the impact of good things are only on good people. Those who are not good, they don't think in those terms. They don't want to change. But I have a faith in the society, I have faith in the government. They are trying their best to do something about it. Although I also don't forget that in 1970, the Bilingualism and Multiculturalism Act was introduced by Trudeau. In 82, he brought the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. But what happened after that? Things have keep coming back. Go to Quebec, Marwa, Pauline Marwa, she was against children playing in turbans. Parizeau, he was so hateful of ethnicities that, remember when he lost the vote, the yes vote in his favor?
Yes.
Who did he blame? Money and ethnics. Then look at the present day Premier of Quebec, Legault. What has he done? Banned turbans, banned kippas, you can't wear a cross, everything. So it hasn't gone. The laws are there. The Charter of Rights does not allow him to do that, but he's doing it openly. So, I mean, it may disappoint you to hear that, but I'm giving you the history and the reality of what is happening.
I'm hoping that in the years to come, that we would have done something towards the eradication of this.
Sushma ji, you are doing a very good job, excellent job. I support you, I honor you. But it doesn't mean if the results are not coming out positive according to you, you stop them. No, you continue to do that. Lie and truth. People still believe in truth.
Of course.
And though people lie.
Right, true. Thank you so very much for coming to our studios and talking to us on our 7th annual Hands Against Racism event.
It's my honor. Thank you very much. You invited me. You thought of me. Thank you.
It's an honor for me to introduce you to Baltej Singh Dhillon, who needs no introduction. He's a known trailblazer in our community. He is the first urban Sikh officer to be recruited by the RCMP. When he did that, he created a history of sorts, but that was very challenging for him. He faced a lot of racist backlash, both within the RCMP and outside the force. But nevertheless, he's there now, and he continues to inspire many youngsters who can now believe that they can break the glass ceiling. So Baltej Singh Dhillon was the first recipient of Hands Against Racism Award. We wanted to send a very strong message. We wanted to recognize the kind of efforts these people are making.
Thank you, Gurpreet ji. This has been a wonderful opportunity to continue to attend this wonderful event Hands Against Racism. This event, like every year, is a reminder to us that the work is not yet complete. We have seen in recent while with COVID-19, some of our brothers and sisters from the Chinese community are now being targeted. And those attacks have risen since 2019. They have become violent, they have become vile. And this is a symptom for all of us and a message to all of us that our work is not complete. Racism just doesn't arise out of nowhere. It's there. It was already there. And now there's a lightning rod for those people who have been quiet, who have not had a platform, who have not been able to speak out against their fellow Canadian, against their fellow neighbor, because they are different in color or different in shape or different in their language. Now been given this wrong message or wrong information that somehow these are the people that caused COVID-19. And this is not dissimilar to many other events that we have seen in our life here in Canada and around the world, where some misinformation, some lie, some fraud, some error in someone's thinking and an assumption causes this fear and ignorance to then fuel a very vile and violent behavior, which we have coined and which we call racism. But this destroys lives. This destroys people. These types of behaviors and attitudes take away from who we are as human beings, and also what we've committed to do as Canadians in Canada. When we spend time fighting each other, not seeing the potential in the other, not taking advantage of all of the gifts, the blessings, the skills, the experiences, the knowledge that our brothers and sisters from around the world have brought into this country, that is when we fall behind. That is when we lose opportunity. That is when we actually are no longer moving forward, but have gone backwards. And what's happened in this past year has set us back at least 10 or 20 years. So it is our collective responsibility that we mind our words, we mind our actions, and we mind our thoughts. And when we catch ourselves in doing something that paints someone or demonstrates our own ignorance and our own bias and our own lack of understanding, that we pause, that we take a moment and reflect on that and say, I can do better. I can absolutely do better. And then at that moment, we also have a responsibility to help those on either side of us, on the left and the right, that if that person or that individual is engaged in that behavior, regardless of who they are, they could be your brother, your sister, your cousin, your friend, take that opportunity to stop that language, that behavior, that conversation. Because when we do that, when we take responsibility, we are then, and only at that moment, ready to make a change, not only for ourselves, but for others. And to that end, I certainly will raise my hand against racism. Thank you.
Moving to our next speaker, Sunera Thobani. She teaches at University of British Columbia. She's also a path breaker. She is a Muslim woman. Being a woman of color, she has faced a lot of racism in our community. But the biggest challenge came to her life after 9/11, when she openly blamed the US foreign policies for the 9/11 terror attacks. And that led to a lot of hate messages against her, a lot of hate directed at her, and she was under security for some time. So during 2016, when Spice Radio was running this campaign and Donald Trump was going to be the president of US, we saw how there was a spike in hate attacks against Muslims. So we wanted to send across a message. We wanted to send a message against Islamophobia. That's the reason why Spice Radio chose Sunera Thobani as the second recipient of our annual Hands Against Racism Award.
So thank you very much for inviting me to be here. Thank you, Gurpreet. I'd just like to begin by acknowledging that I live on and work on Indigenous territories on Coast Salish land. So I want to recognize that and also recognize that these Indigenous peoples are involved in struggles for sovereignty. And so I consider it really important that we learn about these struggles and build solidarity with Indigenous peoples. In terms of my own experiences with racism, I mean, I could tell you, I don't know, hundreds of stories. Being followed in a store and then, seeing other people just walk around freely, but having the security person follow me in a store in downtown Vancouver. Being refused service. I remember, and this was many years ago, but I remember walking into one of those stands in a mall and picking a pair of earrings that I really liked, and the woman refusing to sell them to me. And I was just so outraged, but she just refused and just put them in a drawer. And so I got a friend's husband to go back the next week, and he was able to purchase those earrings. So, my mother being hit by a snowball from a car thrown as we were trying to get into our car, and, a passing car with young white people in it, throwing snowballs at my mother and, shouting for fun. So I remember lots of stories like that. And unfortunately, I think that COVID has made the situation much worse. Because I sense the racism in the streets, walking in the streets, you'll be wearing a mask and lots of other people won't be wearing a mask. And, refusing to move out of the way when you try and cross them, going for walks and seeing people with dogs. The dogs kind of loitering on the street, and the people will just block the street, and it'll be a busy street and they still won't move. Because I think it's because you're a woman of color, they won't move. So that kind of, I've become very aware during the COVID situation, this sense of white entitlement over public space. And every time I go for a walk, my daughter stopped me at some point and said to me, listen, we go out for our health, to get some fresh air, to be healthy. And if you get so infuriated every time we go for a walk, you're actually defeating the purpose. So that really made me kind of stop and think about it. But there are many, many stories like that I'm sure are very common to many people in our community. In terms of, does it make a difference? I mean, do I feel like there is any hope? I do feel a huge sense of hope right now, and that is because of the Black Lives Matter movement. They have really transformed global consciousness around the level of racism that Black people experience. So anti-Black racism is, of course, number one on the agenda right now when we think about racism. And of course, the Black Lives Matter movement has been supported by many other communities as well, including South Asian and other Asian communities. So I feel like, coming together, organizing, naming the racism has a huge impact. And we're seeing the impact of that globally right now because of what the Black Lives Matter movement has accomplished. I think there's a lot of anti-Asian racism right now, a lot of anti-Chinese racism, blaming Chinese people for the virus, blaming South Asians for the virus, pointing at our extended families as threatening the health of Canadians. But I do see a lot of hope in the anti-racist organizing that's taking place right now. I just feel that our community needs to really get involved in that. But I see huge changes coming because of the level of organizing globally around these issues. If there's one thing COVID has done, it's shown how deeply entrenched racism is in Canadian society. If we look at Toronto, for example, over 80% of the level of infections and which are COVID related are Black people and people of color. And of course, our communities are the communities that do frontline work in disproportionate numbers. And I feel like the people who are doing the frontline work, literally they're being asked to put their lives on the line. And these are largely people of color wherever you look across Canada. So I think that the organizing is having an impact because it is making these connections between the impact of COVID, police racism, anti-Black racism, and there is an awareness of racism in a way that I haven't seen in this country for a very long time. And also, I think that awards like this one, the Spice Radio campaign, Hands Up Against Racism, the yearly award that's given out, I think that really profiles the issue. It raises attention to it, but more important, it also shows role models for people in our community who do stand up and speak out. So I think it's really important to value that kind of activism because often it can feel lonely. This is not one of those moments, but I think that Spice Radio has played a really important role in naming the problem of racism and then you know, really bringing attention to role models in the community who are anti-racist activists.
Moving on to our next speakers, Charlie Smith and Alan Dutton. Charlie Smith is the editor of Georgia State. I consider him as my mentor. He has been writing consistently against bigotry and racism in his reputed paper. And for doing that, he has been facing a lot of challenges. Secondly, Alan Dutton. He is an anti-racism educator and an activist who has been getting threats from the white supremacists, which is a very serious issue. We needed to amplify the stories of these two white folks who stood up for the minorities. And that's the reason Spice Radio chose both of them for their annual Hands Against Racism Award.
The question is whether or not racism is universal and crosses time barriers. My answer to that is that racism is a process. It's what we call racialization. Racism is not a natural thing. We see racialization occur between people of the same skin colors, the same language groups, and so forth. In fact, if you look at the history of Canada, you'll find that Irish people were often barred from certain kinds of jobs. They were encouraged to come to Canada to be low-wage workers. And so that is a process that we can also lump in with racialization. Of course, the situation with Asian people and people from African descent right now is much more serious. We have a very and of course indigenous peoples. They are facing barriers which are long-standing and very, very dangerous and really dehumanizing. We have to fight those barriers, but we have to look at the barriers themselves and how those barriers are created. It's true that racism in Canada is systemic. Why is it systemic, and how did it become so? So my view, racism is based on material conditions, and we have to look at those conditions in order to be able to prevent racism. Right now we have hate groups that are mobilizing, recruiting young people, and we have to give those young people the right kind of information. We have to be able to help them realize that we are all one race, and that if we treat each other with respect, we will have a much better country, and we will be able to protect democracy. If you look at the United States today, we have a real threat to democracy based on misinformation, disinformation about the nature of our relationships with other groups.
Thank you, Gurpreet. It's wonderful to be able to talk about Hands Against Racism, and it's been such a wonderful event in our community and helping to raise awareness about this scourge and also solutions and having people thinking about what needs to be done, because I don't think we can be complacent in the 21st century. This problem has not gone away, and that's very obvious from looking at events, unfortunately, on both sides of the border. You could see the white supremacists who were storming the Capitol on January 6th in Washington, D.C. And similarly, you're seeing a lot of hateful messages being sent over social media towards politicians of color, broadcasters, journalists, and I think it's something that the education must continue and the awareness must continue. One of the biggest challenges, I think, is how to get people to think empathetically and to look at the world through other people's eyes. And that's part of the problem with racism, is I think people are so selfish sometimes, and they're only seeing things from their perspective, and they're blaming others and they're scapegoating others, and demagogues will take advantage of this for their own purposes not just in Canada, but in other countries. And I really appreciate what Spice Radio does, Shishmaji, and the whole team of broadcasters, including you, Gurpreet, to try to address this and bring attention and awareness, and because we really should be getting along and not just tolerating. I don't like that word tolerate because it kind of has a negative connotation. I think we need to embrace other cultures, learn from other cultures, and become more global in our outlook. So thanks again for the opportunity to say these words. It's a privilege to be here at Spice Radio, and thanks to the station for all it does for our community.
I met Nikki Sharma when she was a lawyer and looking at Vancity board to join their board. And then I met her when she ran for Vancouver Hastings riding on the NDP ticket and won that. She is our member of the Legislative Assembly of British Columbia, and we are very proud that we gave her an award in 2019. Along with Nikki Sharma was Cecilia Point, whom we gave an award as well. Cecilia Point is with the Aboriginal Tourism Department, and her active work for the past 25 years to eradicate racism has been a point of inspiration for all of us.
Thank you, Shishmaji, for having me here. It's so great to once again be part of the Hands Against Racism campaign and to be with you here today. I want to say that as somebody who's a woman of color in politics, I've felt marginalized and experienced racism in my life. And I know it's a struggle that we have to continue every day, and that's why it's so important that we all gather during the Hands Against Racism campaign to stand up to it. I'm so excited to be now an MLA and a parliamentary secretary for community development and nonprofits. And through my role, I would like to use it to highlight all those voices that are not usually at the table, that need to be at the table, to combat all the forces of racism that work against people from being at the table. And it's really a pleasure to be here, and I wish you all a great campaign.
Anta Cecilia Point, Talitsanatla Musqueam. I'm in my territory today, the Musqueam territory, and I want to talk about what a privilege it was to receive the award last time. It was a couple of years ago, because we were just saying the pandemic took some time away from us. But, you know, I've certainly dealt with racism my whole life, and not on face, because I don't appear like, if you met me, you wouldn't really know that I was mixed race. But my father went to residential school. My father was Musqueam and Squamish, and before he went, he spoke his language fluently, and he had many cultural teachings. And residential school took a lot from our past generation. So that would have been our huge first experience with racism. And in the residential school, he was not allowed to speak his language. And very sadly, he was horribly abused in every way imaginable. So when he came out, he wanted to graduate grade 12. And he was very, very good at math, and he was taking, I guess, at that time, which was the provincial exams, or something like the provincial exams, and they kept failing him. So his mother finally went down to the school and asked, why do you keep failing him? And they said, oh, we don't graduate Native Indians. So it kind of makes you wonder, what was the purpose of residential school? Because was it to get a leaving certificate or graduate? No, apparently not. So it was just to take away our language and take us away from our communities and our traditions. So again, like walking through my life, I don't really experience racism until someone asks me, what are you? Because sometimes people can tell that I'm mixed. And then as soon as I tell them that I'm First Nations and my mother was Irish, I want to say there's no stupid questions, but there are. And I met with a whole lot of, racist comments, you guys are living off our tax dollars and which we are not. I actually own a home, so I pay property taxes and I pay taxes. I pay federal and provincial income taxes. There's very small areas where you would not pay taxes, and those are places that are on reserve only. I have always worked my whole life. And the other huge racist experience that the people of Musqueam experienced was we have an ancient burial site in Marpole, and it is actually a National Historic Site, and it's not supposed to be disturbed, but all of a sudden a developer got a permit to start digging, and they dug up many of our bodies before the community of Musqueam went and stood down there and protected the site. And I remember bringing my children down there and asking them to stand with me because the whole community was standing there, and they were only little at the time. And I couldn't believe that this was the first time I was really having to explain to them how we were different, because no one was going to go dig up the Vancouver cemetery, but they were digging up ours and literally just throwing body parts into buckets and onto shelves and so on. And immediately my children made signs and held them up, don't dig up our ancestors. And eventually we had to actually buy that property back to protect it. So I also know sometimes I do stand up for environmental rights. We had another economy before colonial economy came here, so we don't want our fish destroyed and our fresh water destroyed. We still have folks in our community who go out hunting. We want to strip cedar for our ceremonial purposes, for hats and clothing and jewelry and so on. And the environment, is our primary concern, because our creation story is such that the trees and the animals and the mountains are all our relatives. So that is something that I want to bring forward to people who live in Canada. I want them to enjoy this environment. I want us to all stand together in solidarity. When we stood protecting our site, members from every community came and stood with us. I remember first the South Asian cabbies going by, and they stood, and that's where I met Gurpreet from Spice Radio. That's where I met Harsha Walia, who was last year's recipient. They all came and stood with us. The Korean Canadians came and stood with us, the Jewish community, and we all stood in solidarity. So I think that's my message going forward. If all communities stand in solidarity with each other, that's how we can eventually wipe out racism. OCM.
In 2020, we could not hold our event because COVID had just started. Our recipients for the 6th year of Raise Your Hands Against Racism were Cal Dosanjh, VPD veteran, a detective, and Harsha Walia, an activist in our community. It is with great pleasure that I introduced Cal Dosanjh in today's program to receive his award for last year. When I first met Cal Dosanjh, he was with the Vancouver Police Department, and we followed him. His stand for the children, his stand for the homeless has been very inspiring, and he is also the CEO and founder of Kids Play. Our award to Cal Dosanjh was on multiple levels. So we are very pleased to have Cal Dosanjh with us today.
Growing up in a traditional South Asian family back in the 70s and 80s, it wasn't easy, especially being a visible Sikh. I belonged to a very traditional Sikh family that was exercising its faith. And I recall growing up with multiple and a myriad of racial incidents when I was a kid. I remember getting into multiple fights, trying to stand up for my rights. And at the time, the sad thing is, this was all normalized, that this was a way of life that we would have to fight to protect our identities. And it didn't make any sense to me as a kid, but it was always about survival. That should never have been the case. No child should have to be exposed to such extreme trauma or to question who they are, their culture, their faith, their caste, their creed. And I am so happy and so glad that we are in a country like Canada, because over time, those that were ignorant or oblivious to cultural differences have now become educated and aware. Canada has always been a country that promotes multiculturalism and diversity. And I personally believe that knowledge is power. Through educational awareness, we'll be able to break down these barriers and walls which divide and separate us. And I truly believe that initiatives such as Raising Hands, that's run by Spice Radio, Raising Hands Against Racism, is a tremendous initiative that does wonders with respect to breaking these barriers down, providing educational awareness, and promoting diversity, inclusivity, and multiculturalism. It's going to take a concerted effort by all of us working together, shoulder to shoulder, with one value, with one thought process, that we are here to stand together and accept one another as we are. So thank you, Sushma Ji, for everything that you do, and thank you, Spice Radio, for this wonderful initiative and for bestowing me with such a privilege and honor.
It was a great pleasure to meet Annie Ohana, who is with the Surrey School District. Last year, when we could not hold our event, we had an opportunity to go to her school and meet her students and talk about racism. I would like to introduce Annie Ohana in our program today.
So the reason that, well, I think that such events, and they're not just events, I think they're moments in time. They're moments where we need to stop and to truly reflect and look at our own behaviors, look at the behaviors of others, and not let the world keep us busy with other things. So for myself, when we talk about Hands Against Racism and any anti-racist pedagogy and anti-racism event, it truly is a moment in time to question everything. And that is not something that we really teach enough about as an educator. I know we're trying to build that critical mindset of, don't just accept things as they are. And what better than an anti-racism event or an anti-racist kind of way of being to really think about our world and the way we treat one another. We can never take for granted humanity. And I think sometimes we do, and sometimes power structures get in the way of, I want mine, I want these resources, I need to be here, this is my position. And that's where we get into violence and danger and racism and microaggressions and stereotypes and all kinds of behavior that in fact dehumanize. So it's sad to say that we need these moments to stop, to reflect. How do we humanize people? How do we treat them as our equals rather than our underlings, or that somehow we believe in superiority? Because we know that in terms of biology, that just isn't true, that we are all one and the same. And why do we need this every year? I wish we could say that we're past the point of needing to reflect on what are reactions. So what I mean by that is that right now, just a couple weeks ago, we heard that racism against Asian populations, or those that look Asian, is up 700% due to COVID. And how sad is that? Because I really think that anti-racism and anti-racist pedagogy and events like these really create change. They do. They absolutely do. But perhaps as we have new situations arise, we realize that we're not there yet when it comes to truly humanizing one another. We're not there yet in letting go of the labels that denigrate, that oppress certain populations. So why do we need this every year? Because we do need to kind of, it's like a muscle that we need to train. We need to train our muscles. We need to train our mind to understand that there is nothing better than equality and justice in our world. That there is nothing better, that truly I can be no higher, no better, live no greater life than to make sure those around me live just as good as lives as I do. So I guess we can be negative in a way, and to think that such events like these are so crucial when it comes to responding to acts of racism. But I take the long view that as we do this every year, we hope that every year we grow in our humanity. We grow in our understanding of how to treat each other like humans. And at the end of the day, that when racism does occur, we are much stronger in the stances we take, and we go much deeper to transform our systems, which ties right back into where I started. And where I started was the need to reflect. So I hope that on this day, on the 7th year, that we once again continue to reflect on ourselves, on our communities, on everyone, and to truly move forward with the notion that to be anti-racist is to do that every day and not to just choose one day a year. So I hope that you celebrate Hands Against Racism and all events like these, but also to be mindful that once that event is over, once that show is over, whatever it might look like, what are you doing in your daily life to make sure that your humanity is reflected in the way you behave towards others?
Hello, this is Rachna Singh, Parliamentary Secretary for Anti-Racism Initiatives. On behalf of the Premier John Horgan, I would like to congratulate Spice Radio on their Hands Against Racism campaign. I know this is a very important work, and I really applaud Sushma ji for starting this initiative. Last year's global events have brought racism to the forefront, and we know that as a government, we cannot tackle it by ourselves. We are bringing in a lot of anti-racism initiatives, but we need strong community allies to work along with. So I'm really thankful for the grassroots campaigns like Hands Against Racism that are working so hard in the community and bringing out the awareness. I would really like to congratulate the 2 recipients of the 7th annual Hands Against Racism campaign. It is my honor to announce the two winners, Kamika Williams and Tammy Ho. I've had the opportunity to meet with Tammy and the work that she has done to fight the anti-Asian hatred that we have been seeing in the wake of COVID-19. I know this has been a very, very difficult year, but especially for the Asian Canadian community, it has been very difficult, very uncomfortable, and really applaud Tammy for what she's doing to fight this hatred and bringing the awareness in the community. I really want to congratulate her and to her grassroots endeavors and wishing her the very best. I haven't had the opportunity to meet with Kamika yet, but I did talk to her. Last year's global events, especially in the wake of George Floyd murder, we saw big movement arising, that was the Black Lives Matter, and which brought the racism to the forefront. I really appreciate what Kamika did, especially with her launch of the Black Shirt Day initiative. That I think is really important, that initiative that we did on the birth anniversary of Martin Luther King, and it was adopted by most of the school districts here in British Columbia. And our government was a proud partner of it. So really want to thank Kamika for what she's doing to bring awareness about racism and to fight hatred in our society. So wishing both the recipients the very best. I really think that we need many more strong allies like you to create awareness about racism and also to create a society that is just, equal, and the society that we all deserve. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rachna, for this award. It really means a lot to be recognized for my work in the community. My name is Kamika Williams. I am the co-founder and former chairperson of Anti-Racism Coalition Vancouver. We were the organization that created the Black Shirt Day initiative. It's a global movement to really push to have mandatory curriculum in Canadian schools. It's also a movement to recognize the ongoing civil rights struggle that Black and racialized Canadians have been facing for hundreds of years. It's also a day to, or a time to recognize anti-racism education and really educate our youth on how to build solidarity and truly be anti-racist. Currently, I'm still working on Black Shirt Day initiatives, so trying to, make Black Shirt Day Canada-wide next year for 2022. Hopefully, the Black Shirt Day, I'm working hard to also spread it across the United States for next year as well. I've also partnered with some other organizations and community leaders to start working on a learning center, hopefully in the Vancouver area. These initiatives, Black Shirt Day as well as the Learning Center, will provide opportunities for members of the Black community to really show their work. We're talking about Black students building the Black Shirt Day website, sourcing Black developers to build the structure to have the Learning Center, hiring Black employees, supporting Black artists. So it's really an opportunity to create tangible, meaningful change within the Black community and create opportunities for those who haven't had it before. So again, thank you so much for this award. It truly means a lot to be recognized for my work, and I'm very honored to receive this award today. So thank you so much.
I want to say thank you to Spice Radio for giving me this award, and also for organizing Hands Against Racism. This is such an important and powerful initiative. And me representing the community, want to thank the organization or the effort you have put in to support us. And I personally really appreciate your support and encouragement along the way. For myself, ever since the pandemic started, we have seen a surge in racism against East Asian people or anyone who appear to be East Asian, have experienced a tremendous amount of hate and attack, either through verbal or physical. And recently we saw in the South what happened to 6 Asian women. It's with a heavy heart that I'm receiving this award, and I know this is just a beginning on my journey to continue fight for the basic justice. And I encourage everybody to join me. We cannot just say we're not racist anymore. Right now, the situation demands everyone to be anti-racism, to take our action, protect the weakest members of our community. And it's still happening. And I encourage everybody to join me and join Spice Radio to continue stand up against violence, against injustice. And together we're stronger and we're more united, and we'll have a better and more just society together. Thank you.
We are also very pleased that the Provincial Health Officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, herself has sent a special message for Spice Radio's Raise Your Hands Against Racism. Here is Dr. Bonnie Henry.
I'm Dr. Bonnie Henry, BC's Provincial Health Officer. Racism, intolerance, and discrimination have no place in our province. We must all find ways to go beyond good intentions and take action to end racism wherever and however we can. Today, I join Spice Radio and many others to raise my hand against racism. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Dr. Arun Garg, with whom I present a program once a month in Gupshup. Dr. Arun Garg has expanded his medical field now to a spiritual field as well. And through his talks to many people in Canada and abroad, he talks about how we can be in unison with our own self, regardless of what culture, color, creed we come from. And inside, all of us are human beings that are similar and very diverse at the same time. Dr. Arun Garg.
Hello, I'm so happy to be with you, along with Shushma ji joining a long-standing fight against racism by Spice Radio and Sushma ji. I am so happy also to share with you my own experience about what racism means, what it has meant to me, how it has shaped my journey in Canada, but more important, especially for young people, for generation to come, what it may look like, because that's what it's all about. This campaign, this awareness is all about. It's being done along with a very beautiful festival originated in Indian subcontinent, Holi. Holi is a festival of equity, equilibrium, celebration. And this campaign is also about equity, celebration, and hope. My own journey came long time ago. All my education was here. I was fortunate enough to overcome those hurdles. But I must say, it hasn't been easy. There is a bias, there is a built-in bias. So overcome that, we have to prepare ourselves. And we prepare with hard work, we prepare with focus, and we prepare with energy to overcome this. It will be wrong for me to even say that racism doesn't exist. And currently we're going through some major systemic racism issues. But Canada and its leadership is taking that bang on. As a medical doctor, I'm very actively involved in making awareness of racism, especially in health. So my message to young people is that be aware that there is a bias against diversity, not so much as an organized bias, but just the human nature of bias which exists. But don't let that stop you from your dreams. Don't let it stop you from what you want to achieve. And that's what fighting racism is all about. Allowing awareness, building awareness, and most important, giving everybody a chance to achieve what they want to be. So for me, the definition of racism is that when you're not able to achieve what you think you should have, and fighting of racism is your ability to able to achieve that. So I will end my short conversation with you with a hope. Hope for future. Hope for generations to come. That Canada will be a better place because of this campaign. Canada will be a better place because we are having this conversation. Do your best. Be focused, hard work, honesty, integrity. Most important, never give up. You will achieve what you want to achieve, what you want to be, in spite of all the external barriers and forces. Let's celebrate this campaign together. Let's do our share. And I think this year, especially at the time of COVID, it's even more important to learn from COVID. And let's work together. We're all in it together. We look after each other, and that's part of the campaign. So I want to congratulate Sushma ji. I want to congratulate her team. I want to congratulate Spice Radio for taking this project. Society is better because of that. Canada is better because of that. So thank you. Thank you for listening. God bless.
And with that, we wrap up our 7th annual Raise Your Hands Against Racism signature event. We thank you for your ongoing support as we come together to stand up for diversity, for unity, and to bridge these racial boundaries together. Thank you.